Imagine a world where we redirect just a fraction of what we spend on war into science, education, clean energy, and health. That world isn't fiction, it's a choice. But right now, we are teetering on the edge of yet another conflict, this time between Israel and Iran. And here's the thing, the outcome of this isn't just about the Middle East. It could send shockwaves through the entire global system. Economies, supply chains, energy prices, and even international diplomacy all are vulnerable. Which is why this is a moment to pause, to think, and to act not with anger, but with vision. Pausing a war isn't a sign of weakness. It's often the smartest move available in a world already overwhelmed by conflict, climate threats, economic fragility, and technological disruption. It's easy to respond to aggression with more aggression. It's harder, but far more productive, to respond with strategy, restraint, and foresight. That's where real leadership comes into play, not in reacting to the heat of the moment, but in cooling it down long enough to think clearly and act for the long term. A ceasefire, in many cases, isn't the end of a fight. It's the beginning of a much more intelligent process, one where resources, time, and human energy are no longer wasted in destruction, but redirected toward stability, security, and shared growth. Ceasefires buy time. Time to assess what's at stake, time to negotiate with cooler heads, time to prevent irreversible damage, and in today's interconnected world, damage in one region doesn't stay contained. Supply chains don't recognize borders. Global markets don't pause for political grudges, and ordinary people from different countries and cultures pay the price when the most powerful actors fail to act with responsibility. Consider what happens when a war continues unchecked. Lives lost, infrastructure ruined, economies destabilized, families displaced, trust destroyed. Now compare that with what's possible during a pause. Humanitarian aid gets through, diplomatic channels reopen, economies stabilize, and international cooperation becomes possible again. It's not about surrender. It's about preventing collapse of credibility, of alliances, of long-term ambitions that matter far more than any immediate territorial gain or political advantage. There's a parallel here with the way we solve hard problems in science and engineering. When something goes wrong in a system, you don't just hit it harder. You stop, you run diagnostics, you isolate the variables, you consult others who have been there before, and you rebuild. Stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Nations, like systems, need that space to breathe when they hit a failure point. A ceasefire is that breathing room. Without it, we just keep compounding the error. Sometimes the bravest thing a leader can do is not push forward, but pull back. Because in pulling back, you create the conditions for something better to emerge. You allow for the messy, difficult, and necessary conversations that can lead to real, lasting solutions. You show the world that might doesn't have to mean violence, that strength can also look like patience, vision, and a willingness to listen. The world is tired of repeating the same patterns. Decade after decade, we see wars start with loud justifications and end with quiet regrets. We've learned the hard way that there are no real winners when destruction leads the conversation. What matters now is who will be wise enough to shift the narrative, who will see that pressing pause is not a political gamble, but a strategic advantage. And let's not underestimate the power of global perception, how a leader chooses to respond in moments like these echoes far beyond their borders. It sends signals to allies, rivals, and citizens alike. Choosing a ceasefire sends a message that you're thinking in decades, not headlines, that you value human lives over symbolic victories, that you understand the cost of escalation isn't just paid today. It's carried by future generations in the form of lost progress, stalled innovation, and fractured societies. The truth is, The most complex problems facing the world right now won't be solved by missiles. They'll be solved by minds that can focus, collaborate, and persist over time, and none of that happens in a war zone. It happens in classrooms, labs, boardrooms, and dialogue rooms. It happens when we give peace the space to grow. But for that to occur, someone has to hit pause, not forever, just long enough to remember what we're actually trying to build. History doesn't admire those who shouted the loudest. It remembers those who stopped the shouting and started building. A ceasefire isn't the end goal. It's a smart checkpoint along the way, a recalibration point, a sign that we're mature enough as a global community to step back from the edge when we see what's coming. In the end, pressing pause isn't about fear, it's about clarity. And clarity leads to smarter decisions, broader coalitions, and more stable futures. That's what's on the line. Not just territory, not just pride, but the kind of world we want to leave behind. One shaped by foresight, not fallout. Wars have a way of stealing our best efforts, what takes decades to build. Schools, hospitals, research labs, energy grids, transportation systems can be wiped out in days. And while wars are often framed as necessary for security or justice, the damage they inflict on progress is both immediate and long, lasting. Progress doesn't just slow down in wartime, it often gets reversed. Generations of work, investment, and collaboration can vanish overnight, and it takes far more time and effort to rebuild than it ever did to destroy. There's a hidden cost to every missile launched and every city bombed. That cost is paid in delayed innovation, disrupted education, abandoned health initiatives, and broken partnerships. When minds that could be curing diseases or solving climate challenges are instead focused on survival, the world as a whole loses ground. When a country's infrastructure is destroyed, it doesn't just impact that region. It sends ripples through global trade, supply chains, humanitarian networks, and economic stability. The setback isn't contained. It's contagious. War might offer short-term gains for a few, but it comes at long-term losses for many. The promise of peace is that it allows for steady improvement. Technology, medicine, clean energy, all of these depend on time, focus, and cooperation. War strips away all three. Budgets that could fund clean water projects or next generation vaccines are funneled into weapons and recovery. Teams that could be building the next breakthrough in AI or agriculture are displaced or divided. Momentum, which is everything in progress, is lost. It's easy to talk about patriotism or sovereignty as justifications for conflict, but that language rarely matches the reality on the ground. The majority of people on all sides are not asking for more war. They're asking for electricity that stays on, schools that stay open, and hospitals that have medicine. They're asking for jobs, for dignity, for opportunities that war constantly interrupts. The tragedy is that so many of these requests are completely achievable until tanks roll in and silence all forward motion. Even in cases where conflict seems inevitable, it's critical to ask, what is the true cost of this choice? Not just in lives or dollars, but in lost possibilities. What won't get invented because the talent was forced to flee? What won't get discovered because funding was reallocated? What relationships won't get built because trust was shattered? These are harder questions, but they matter even more than the immediate headlines. In a connected world, war doesn't stay local. We've seen this repeatedly. Energy prices spike. Food shortages ripple across borders. Refugees seek safety wherever they can find it, and each of these disruptions has a compounding effect. Schools in distant countries take in displaced students. Hospitals face strain. Governments shift budgets, and businesses hesitate to invest in unstable regions. All of this slows progress down across the board. It's not just a moral issue, it's a strategic one. The irony is that so many of the resources we're fighting over could be multiplied through cooperation. Energy can be generated more efficiently together. Water can be preserved through joint infrastructure. Technology can be shared in a way that lifts entire regions, but war makes collaboration impossible. It replaces curiosity with fear, it turns potential partners into permanent enemies, and it locks nations into a loop of rebuilding what never should have been destroyed in the first place. Peace isn't a luxury, it's the foundation of sustainable growth. It's the condition in which real problem solving happens, and every day spent in conflict is a day lost to progress that could have benefited millions. There's no productivity in rubble, no innovation in fear, no breakthroughs in exile. When war dominates the agenda, the future gets mortgaged. What history continues to show us is that even when wars end, the damage persists. Economies don't bounce back overnight. Education systems take years to stabilize. Families carry trauma for generations, and the innovations that could have been, the diseases that might have been cured, the emissions that could have been avoided, the technologies that might have transformed lives, remain permanently out of reach. That's the true cost of war. It erodes not just what we've built, but what we might have built. It doesn't just solve problems poorly, it prevents better solutions from ever being born. In an age where we have the tools, knowledge, and capacity to solve enormous challenges, war is the ultimate distraction. It's time we started seeing it for what it really is, not a pathway to strength, but a detour away from the future we could all share. When systems are stable, people can think long-term. They can plan, invest, collaborate, and build. Stability gives room for ideas to grow into real-world solutions. It creates an environment where businesses can take risks, students can focus on learning, researchers can concentrate on breakthroughs, and governments can invest in policies that deliver future benefits rather than immediate survival. The presence of peace doesn't automatically solve every problem, but it unlocks the possibility of progress. It sets the conditions where innovation thrives and where cooperation becomes not just desirable, but logical. Innovation depends on more than intelligence. It needs time, resources, and trust. In conflict zones, those ingredients disappear quickly. Power grids are unreliable. Transportation is disrupted. Communication networks go down. Talent either flees or is forced to divert its energy to crisis response. But when a country, or even a region, enjoys a period of stability, its smartest minds don't have to focus on how to survive the next day. They can work on how to improve the next decade. The same is true for cooperation. It's hard to negotiate, partner, or share knowledge when conflict dominates the relationship. Hostility builds walls where bridges are needed. But in a stable setting, trust can be nurtured. Countries can pool their strengths to solve mutual problems, whether it's health threats, food security, or sustainable energy. The progress we need on a global level won't come from isolation. It will come from intelligent, collaborative efforts between governments, industries, and scientists working toward common goals. This is why even temporary peace holds value. It allows ideas to circulate. It allows partnerships to form, and it proves again and again that what we can achieve when we're not at war far exceeds what we gain from conflict. The world needs more time to solve big problems, and stability is the tool that buys us that time. Without it, we're just stuck managing damage. With it, we can create something better, smarter systems, stronger economies, healthier populations, and cleaner environments. In that environment, innovation is not a gamble. It becomes the natural next step. Solving conflict isn't all that different from solving a complex technical problem. It rarely works when approached emotionally or reactively. Progress comes from breaking the problem into layers, identifying the core issues, building pathways that account for interdependencies, and refining through iteration. Diplomacy, when handled with that kind of structure, can yield outcomes that are both durable and scalable. But too often, it's treated like a last-minute fix rather than a long-term design. A well-engineered system doesn't just solve one problem, it anticipates others. Good diplomacy works the same way. It doesn't just end a conflict temporarily. It builds frameworks that prevent it from reigniting. That means thinking beyond the surface tensions and addressing root causes: economic inequality, historical grievances, access to resources, misinformation, and security concerns. Each of those is its own layer, and skipping any of them usually leads to fragile peace at best. The key is to design solutions that are modular, flexible, and testable. A ceasefire is one module, economic collaboration is another. Shared infrastructure, cultural exchange, third. Party oversight, each plays a role. None work in isolation, but when layered together intelligently, they reinforce each other. If one piece falters, the others hold the structure in place. That's how resilient diplomacy functions. Logic must replace ideology in these moments. Just as no good product is built purely on opinion, no strong peace is built solely on rhetoric. It requires data, feedback, and compromise. And it needs leaders willing to listen not just to their allies, but to their critics, because blind spots can be costly. Conflict thrives on emotion, but resolution demands analysis. The biggest shift comes when decision makers stop thinking about negotiation as a one-time event and start treating it as an evolving system. It doesn't have to be perfect all at once. Like any large-scale project, it needs to launch, gather results, and adjust. The process might be messy at first, but what matters is consistency, transparency, and long-term commitment. The world's most enduring technologies weren't the flashiest. They were the ones built to last, to adapt, and to serve real needs. If diplomacy is approached with that same mindset, the outcomes can be just as revolutionary. Peace can be a product of deliberate design. It just takes the will to build it that way. There's a narrow window here, a small sliver of time to shift course before it's too late. The world is looking for leadership not rooted in ego, but in foresight, not driven by rivalry, but by responsibility. Pressing pause doesn't mean giving up control. It means taking control before chaos takes over. If this war continues, the price won't just be paid in headlines. It'll be paid in missed opportunities, stalled innovation, broken systems, and global instability. But if even one voice of influence speaks out and says, "This stops here," the ripple effect could be transformational. We don't need another war. We need leaders bold enough to build something better. And that starts with the courage to pause.